Just recently, David Attenborough presented a documentary on BBC One called Climate Change, The Facts. And he was highlighting once more the terrible state of affairs of this planet. But he said something that I don't agree with. He said, we have 10 years to turn this thing around. We don't even have 10 days. Why do I say that? Well, back in 1979, the then president, Jimmy Carter, who was a farmer, he was concerned enough to get the top scientists in America to do an in-depth study of global warming. And when he got the report, the final comment in that report was, if we don't act now, it may be too late. 40 years ago, that was. So what's happened in the last 40 years? Any encouraging signs of nations around the earth taking heed of those words? Has America done anything? Well, what do you think? I'll tell you what's happened in the last 40 years. The population has doubled. There were less than 4 billion people in 1979. Now there's approaching 8 billion people. That means their needs are greater. You need houses, industry, products. So industry has had to step up for all of that. And that means, of course, as you know only too well, more waste. And there's two particular industries I want to bring to your notice. The construction industry and the fashion industry. Now, there's a well-known phrase, following the fashion, or followers of fashion, throwaway society, keeping up with the Joneses. Well, I've seen that in my own lifetime. There was a time when people couldn't afford to keep up with the Joneses, so they never even tried. They settled for what they had and made things last a long time. Furniture, clothes, shoes, many, many things they made to last. Now, 40 years ago, in China, you saw the people there riding bikes, thousands and thousands of them coming down the road in a kind of sackcloth. They couldn't afford cars. It was the government officials and wealthy people that had cars. Now in China, there's 200 million people who are rich enough to travel the world. And most of them have got the most luxurious cars and mansions to live in. That's quite a turnaround, isn't it, in 40 years? And something else that's happened in China and in fact everywhere, there's been a major construction program where even horse cities have been built. In fact, in Egypt, in Cairo, they're going to make a new city to replace Cairo, believe it or not, build a new city. In China, there are many cities built from scratch. And what does all this take? It needs concrete. Where do they get concrete from? Cement. Cement manufacturing is one of the biggest polluters on the planet. And remember I said just now about being followers of fashion? Well, did you know that the fashion industry are one of the top polluters in the world because of the toxic chemicals they use in the production of clothes to get the variety of colours? And in those 40 years, the same 40 years, plastic has accumulated to such an extent that 8 million tonnes going up are being put into the oceans every single year. And sea life are suffering terribly because of that. And you can't go for a drive in the country without seeing plastic hanging on the hedges. People throwing stuff out of their car windows as they're driving along. Music festivals where a huge amount of waste is left on the ground when the festival ends. They can't even take their waste home with them. And in Bristol, we got a little stream close to me. It was full of rubbish, and a lot of volunteers agreed to clear this rubbish. Why are we polluting the earth like we are? 90 million tons of CO2 are now going up into the atmosphere. Can you picture 18 million elephants just going up into outer space every single day? That's how much 90 million tons weighs. And you know that saying, out of sight, out of mind? Well, think of the billions, probably, of people that smoke cigarettes. The smoke comes, they exhale the smoke, and it vanishes. Car exhaust vanishes. Power stations and industries, the smoke comes out and vanishes. So it's gone. Thank goodness for that. No, it hasn't gone. It's still there in the atmosphere, poisoning, polluting, killing. And that has been going on for the last 40 years on a scale unprecedented in history. To add to that, deforestation has increased apace. It's hard to believe just how much of the forest is being destroyed. We get our oxygen from our trees. 40% of the phytoplankton in the ocean, another source of oxygen, has been depleted in that same period of time. We are on a suicide mission, it seems to me. You know, governments don't care. And do you know how much they don't care? I was watching on the news a few months ago that they found water on Mars, and everybody was excited. The scientists, the news people. Well, I couldn't understand what they were so excited about. So what? 3 million children will die in the world this year because they're drinking dirty water. Do those scientists care about them? Do the billionaires of this world, the 1% of the world population that owns half the wealth, do they care? They don't care. A millionaire wants to become even richer, and he wants to become a billionaire. He's not concerned about people. People are dispensable. Does anybody care? Well, there's a little girl who is Norwegian, Greta Thunberg. You probably don't even know the name, but her face is seen all over the world. This little 15-year-old girl demonstrated outside of the parliament in Norway with a sign appealing to people to take action to save the world, save the planet. She went on strike from school because she couldn't see the point of having an education if she didn't have a life, if she didn't have a future. And that lovely girl has been joined by tens, if not hundreds of thousands of other children all over the world campaigning against what we are doing to the planet. The question is anybody listening? Are the people that matter listening? I mean, you and I, we might do our little things, small things to try and save the planet, but it's not down to us. It's down to industry, it's down to governments, down to scientists, but their track record is pretty awful, as you know. Can you really put your trust in these people to turn this thing around? Well, I don't know who David Attenborough's putting his trust in, but he said he thinks that we can turn this around within 10 years. We cannot turn it around. The CO2, do you know how long the life expectancy of CO2 is? It's going to be in the atmosphere for at least 100 years. So what's up there now, unless they can devise some amazing, miraculous way of extracting the air, this CO2 from the air, which in itself would cost trillions and trillions of dollars to produce, and there's no nation on earth that's got that sort of money. We are doomed. But we are doomed if there is no loving creator. And I believe that there is a God who created all this. He created all the ecosystems. He created this earth with a perfect balance that mustn't or shouldn't be interfered with. And we come along and we think we know better than God himself. We think we can actually improve on his creation. And I want to tell you what action God is going to take to give these children and all of us a wonderful hope for the future. And it really does rest with him. Now, how do I know there's a creator? Well, do you remember David, who killed Goliath, who became the king of Israel? He was a musician and a composer, and one of his songs or psalms is where he said, "In an awe-inspiring way, I am wonderfully made." And you have to admit, the human body is a miracle of creation, isn't it? I saw a program, Michael Mosley is a doctor, and they had a bisected arm, and they opened up the arm to the tendons, and they were pulling the tendons, and the fingers were moving. Well, I don't have to pull the tendons on my arm because my brain is telling me to move my fingers. My brain is telling me to look left or right, stick my tongue out. Isn't it amazing what you can do just by letting your brain manipulate parts of your body? Now, the only thing I can't manipulate are my ears, but horses and other animals can actually move their ears, can't they? What does that tell you about us? Well, we are a wonder of creation. But what about the earth? The earth equally is a marvel of creation. Now, remember those words of Professor James Lovelock? The earth is a living organism, a self-regulating system, breathing just like us. The earth breathes in and it breathes out. So it's almost like it's got lungs, isn't it? And aren't we grateful that the vegetation on this earth take in this CO2 and breathe it back out again? But do you remember I said that the earth was coping really well for nearly 250 years, once the Industrial Revolution began in this country and all this CO2 has been pumped out in the atmosphere. I thought, well, record temperatures must have happened quite soon. But in 257 years, from pre-industrial revolution to 1990, the record temperature only went up 0.15 of 1 degree. And I thought, well, how could that be if CO2 is responsible for the rise in temperature? And then it occurred to me, the earth was doing a wonderful job of absorbing all this extra CO2. Now take the human body. The body can take punishment. It can take punches. You can break an arm or a leg and the bones will heal. You can have a terrible bruise and it will clear. You can cut your skin and it will form a scab, and then the scab will fall off and there'll be no signs of the injury. Isn't that marvellous? Well, the earth was made the same way. It was made to recover, designed to recover from any punishment that it might receive. But if you kick and punch a man constantly, his organs are going to break down and he'll eventually be a heap on the floor, unconscious, and he will die. We have been pummeling the earth since the Industrial Revolution began with pesticides, chemicals, bombs, nuclear waste, plastic. The list is endless. And the earth has really worked hard to cope with all of that. And now it's in its death throes. And that's why I say, if there is no God, there is absolutely no hope for any of us. When Paul Ehrlich said back in the 70s, everybody's dead, but don't know it yet, I understand now what he meant. We are destroying the earth like I said, we're on a suicide mission. Now I'd like to share with you some wonderful thoughts from the Bible to let you know that there is a hope. You pray for God's kingdom, or you may have prayed for God's kingdom to come and for God's will to be done. What is this kingdom going to do? Well, in Daniel 2:44, it says God's kingdom will crush and put an end to all these selfish, corrupt governments, and it will stand to time indefinite. When will this happen? Well, in Revelation 16, verse 16, it refers to a war called Armageddon, described in verse 14 as the war of the great day of God the Almighty. God has to take action to save those people on the planet who deserve to live, those who love the planet, those who love him, those who love people, care for people. Not the selfish minority that don't care, or could be much more than a minority. In 1 John 2:17 it says, "The world is passing away and so is its desire, but he that does the will of God remains forever." So there will be survivors, that's a promise. And what about these lovely words? They're in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 7. "The whole earth rests free of disturbance, people cry out for joy." Wouldn't that be wonderful? Instead of them crying out in pain and despair, they'll be crying out for joy because there will be nothing to disturb the earth. No weapons, no wars, no pollution, nothing. And these equally lovely words in Jeremiah 29 says, "For I well know the thoughts I am thinking toward you, declares Jehovah," that's God's name, "thoughts of peace, not of calamity, to give you a hope and a future." Now, don't you see God's loving qualities in his creation? Do you think God would have given us a place to live without all the beautiful variety of everything, the variety of foods, fruits, seeds, nuts, animals, fish, colour, sound, beautiful sounds? Do you think he would have given us all these things if he didn't love us? In fact, Jesus said God loved the world so much, that's us, that he gave his only begotten Son that we might live, not die. So the future of our beautiful planet and our future as individuals are in God's hands. He wants us to live forever in paradise. Question is, would you like to live in paradise? Psalm 37:29 says, "The righteous will possess the earth and they will live forever upon it." And if you remember, I said in the first presentation I did, what's the point of a planet full of so many wonderful things and no humans on it to enjoy them? It's pointless. I mean, all the other planets going around our solar system, all the planets in the universe, there's no evidence of life on them. This planet was made for life. Animal life, bird life, fish, so on. And man was the creature that was going to be the custodian of the planet, the carers. And yet we're destroying it. So I hope you feel comfort in these words that God's kingdom is going to bring not only an end to pollution, not only an end to all the wars and sickness and everything, but a place where people can live in true peace and security forevermore. And if you go to jw.org, you can find an awful lot more about this. Any questions you have on anything to do with life and death and God and Jesus and the future, you'll find your answers there.